Welcome, everybody, to History Lessons. I'm your host, the journalist Sin-seer, and today we have a very special guest checking in all the way from California, Justin Warfield. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Dude, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We want to take it all the way back and then all the way up to 2025 to what you currently have going on. For those who may not know, where was Justin born and raised?
I was born in Van Nuys. I grew up in North Hollywood, and I'm like a Valley boy. If you know Los Angeles, you know that the Valley is like if Hollywood and all of that, just like really like Hollywood isn't considered like hip or cool now, but growing up Hollywood was it, you know what I mean? And so like if you grew up in Hollywood, you were kind of in Manhattan, and if you grew up in the Valley, that was considered like Jersey. But it's suburban, there's no like city life, but we're talking about like the Valley is large, like, you know what I mean? So like the Valley is as big as like some Middle Eastern countries. So like when you really break it down, you can live out in the sticks in the Valley, or you can live where I did, which is literally 5 minutes on the freeway, like from like the center of Hollywood. So I grew up in a place called North Hollywood, and the only difference is like you got a mountain range and a canyon between you. I loved it. I still rep the Valley super hard.
Right. Talk about teenage years in the Valley.
Teenage years in the Valley was wild, man, because like for me, I grew up in a neighborhood that was working class, like true middle class. You know what I mean? Like people own their homes, and which as an adult now, and watching what the United States is like and just how hard it is to do that for most people. Everybody owned their home. They owned a car, garage, driveway, green lawn. Kids would play football, like with flag football, from like this lawn to like that driveway. And I was fortunate to grow up on a block with about 15 to 20 other kids who were like ranging from like 5 years younger than me to like 13 or 14 years older. So I had kids my own age I can run with. I had younger kids. And then I had older dudes who were the ones who were sort of the gateway towards music and culture for me in a lot of ways. The only sort of weird thing was it was definitely a very white working class neighborhood, in that like these were all my people and their family. Like I'm bonded to almost all of them still, and many we still have relationships. But like different or diversity then was like, oh, like that dude's mom is Italian. But it's weird because honestly, it was a melting pot, bro. The dude across the street from me, there was like two German parents, and then the kids were all born in the United States. And when I say German, like they were thick accents, like hard to understand. To the left of them was a Sicilian dude and his German wife. And I grew up with these first generation, American kids, but like they were like Irish Catholic and German, and like I'm like coming from a totally different place. My dad's from South Los Angeles. We just called it South Central back then. My dad's black. My mom is a Jewish woman from Brooklyn. So like my sensibilities were crazy different because my family looked different. Like my dad's family, I would spend time with them in South Central, and it was awesome, and it was just fun and parties and music and culture and things that were just that I'm so grateful to have experienced that. But I also knew that like my economic situation was different than theirs, and that was really evident from an early age. Even though that was my family, there were other family members that were living in a different financial situation because of moves my dad made, because he was like really like hard work, hustle mentality, and caught some good breaks. My mom's side, like that was a whole other thing, because they were like a bunch of old Jewish dudes and women from Brooklyn who never lost their accents. They were old. They were like always in Vegas and kind of like high rollers. And they were like, it was crazy. Like my grandfather was in the pornography industry. Like he didn't make movies, but he was involved in pornography on another level of like stocking sex shops. So it was crazy. And then he also had like a condo in Malibu. So like I had summers in Malibu, but I was comfortable in the hood. So like that's weird. Like from jump, that is a crazy thing. But also if you know anything about me musically or politically or anything, it's always been the same thing. You know what I mean? Like just like kind of like a black hippie.
Yeah, best of both worlds.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about your musical influences coming up. Before you got into music personally, what was your musical influences during this time?
Like that I adopted or that were like passed on from the household?
Either or, kind of both.
Yeah. So my mom was into James Taylor, Carole King, Joni Mitchell, Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, the Beatles, Crosby, Stills and Nash, the heavy Beatles. My dad was a promo guy in the record industry. So like it's funny because a lot of people's perception is like, oh, Justin's dad was in the record industry and they think he was like smoking a cigar in a back room and like making moves. My dad was the dude who would like grab a piece of vinyl and hop in the ride with me and go to a radio station and be like, hey Justy, hand him this record. And I'd be like, hi, will you play my dad's record? And they're like, hey, what's up, Justin? Cool, we'll put this on. And I'd be at like Stevie Wonder's radio station, KGLH, Kindness, Joy, Love, Happiness, were the call letters in Los Angeles. And I'd be like, or K-Day, and I'd be like, hey, will you put this on? And they'd be like, hey, Reese's son, Justin Warfield's in here, and he wants to hear the new song. My dad was like hustling, like promo, getting records played. So my dad's artists from the time I was born, well, he just was finishing up with Barry White because he worked at 20th Century Records. When he moved to CBS Records, he immediately inherited the Jacksons after they dropped the 5 from their name. So then that led to Off the Wall, Thriller, Bad, etc. Right? Also Triumph, Destiny, and all of that. The first Jacksons record I remember seeing was Going Places, where it was still Little Michael. So I grew up around the Jackson family, and with him promoting that, I remember Luther Vandross at the house, going up to Barry White's crib. My dad always said, oh, your godfather is Melvin. And that was Melvin Franklin from the Temptations. And so I was around soul music, and that was the only thing my dad listened to. My dad was also a creature of habit. So if he had a new song that he was into, he played that on rotation. So honestly, I only remember like Marvin and Luther and Tina Marie, who I was talking about today. And I am so blessed to have been around that. I was listening to a dude talk today about cultural movements in our lifetime as Gen Xers, and he was related. It was Bill Simmons, who's I think the greatest sports journalist alive, even though he's a Boston person and a Celtics fan. But he's brilliant. He was breaking down the top 10 things about SNL since it's the 50th anniversary this weekend.
Right.
And long story short, he basically was talking about the pivotal moments, and he was talking about Eddie on SNL with Stevie. I remember Stevie in the house a lot. But the reason why I bring that up is because he talked about the Motown 25 when MJ moonwalked, and he talked about the Thriller premiere. Well, I was at home watching the Motown 25. I just got goosebumps. And I watched that in real time. But I was at the premiere of Thriller with my dad when I was like, why are we in a movie theater for a music video? So like that was my upbringing. And those two sides of like this Laurel Canyon, because my parents were hippies who met in the valley at college, and they were like, hippies. But like I grew up truly in both worlds of like, I still have the illustrated book of Peter Max drawings with Beatles lyrics that I took off my mom's shelf when I was probably 7. And I also have a Don't Stop Till You Get Enough 7-inch gold 7-inch on the wall. So like those things are like, I'm both of those things. The only thing that I will say, just to wrap that up, is when I heard hip hop in its infancy, for me as I was born the year of hip hop. I was born in 73 when hip hop started. So you have to realize that like by the time like I'm like 8 or 9, like I wasn't really hearing Curtis Blow, but I definitely heard like Nucleus Jam on it. I definitely heard like all the things K-Day was playing. I remember Beat Street was a really big thing for me, the movie, mainly because I heard Melly Mel's voice and I knew that voice and I remembered that. Run DMC was the gateway drug, and Dougie Fresh and the Get Fresh crew. I remember being on a school trip and these two twins, Ken and Kenneth, who were like literally at my middle school, like it was like me and them and like 3 or 4 other people were like the only brothers in school. There was a couple of black girls, and they started rapping Lottie Dottie to me, and I was like, what is that? And I made them tell me the rhyme, And I tried to memorize it from them spitting it. By the time I got home, I ended up getting the 12-inch, which I still have. And I still know the rhyme. And I did not know until maybe a year or two later when Beat Street came out, and then Kumo D, like when I saw like Cool Mode's, I'm getting mixed up, but when I saw Cool Mode D doing the Christmas rap, and then when I heard Lottie Dottie and I realized that was Slick Rick, and then I started to hear Slick Rick years later when Children's Story and all that buzzed on the scene, that was in my DNA because I grew up listening to artists that were British. So to hear somebody with a British accent rapping, I never talk about this, but Slick Rick is one of my biggest influences as an artist. And so I memorize raps very easily. So like, I still like, you could like tell me like a song from back then and I'll just be like, sucker MCs who did not learn it. If you don't this time, we shall return. Like whatever it is. If I heard it when I was 10, I remember it now. And I'll probably have a few things wrong, but I realized that while I had no musical ability, I could rap along with that. And the rhythm and the cadence, so that was easy for me. The voice has never been. I don't have a great rap voice, but the pocket and the rhythm and the flow and all of that was second nature. So that coupled with hearing new wave at the time, like Duran Duran, Tears for Fears, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Soft Cell, Tainted Love was a big one because like I felt Tainted Love in a big way musically because I didn't realize at the time it's a soul song. Like that is just like a northern soul song from England, but with this white dude, Mark Allman, singing it. So when I heard the synthesizers of new wave, it reminded me of early 80s freestyle and electro, which later I got into with Debbie Deb, Shannon, all that stuff. And like with like the Latin culture in LA was big on freestyle and electro and what Uncle Jam's Army was, which became like the World Class Wrecking Crew, Egyptian Lover, and all that. So like obviously I'm a nerd and a music historian, but also I'm old enough to where I was experiencing these things in real time. So hip hop and new wave was my music, soul and folk and classic rock was my parents. But then like when hip hop made the jump, which to me, I also have to say that I never say this enough. LL is probably, without LL, I know my life wouldn't be the same because my dad was like, hey, we signed like Def Jam is this label. I'm like, I know what Def Jam is. He got me like a red Kangol. He got me this record and I saw it and I was like, yes. Because I remember hearing LL and going, this is it. This is the one. I didn't know about Shan. I didn't know about, all I know is that when I heard my radio, Believe Me, I Like It Loud on the Man with a Box to Rock the Crowd going down the street with a hardcore beat, it was JVC Vivates the Concrete. Like when I heard that, it felt like, my radio, believe, like when he did it like that, I was like, because Run DMC was amazing and it was my introduction to conscious hip hop and rock beats and aggressive drum machines and consciousness. And it was my punk rock because that was like, I can understand what they're talking about, the oppression, and that was to me really like they did it artfully. But by the time I heard LL and that braggadocio MC stuff that later became so much of hip hop post like sort of 86 to like 89, I was hooked, man. And then it just happened fast, dude. Like, cause the jump from like 86 from 87 hip hop like rap music to what happened in 88. Like that, I defy some rap historian to tell me a bigger jump than what happened from just like, b-boy stance, 3-point stance and like boom and like Kangols and Gazelles to like, what would it be like, I was a fiend before I became a teen. I melted microphones instead of cones of ice cream, music oriented. Like, how did it go from like move the crowd to like lyrics of fury? And so that jump from 87 to 88 is when I really became like insane with it. And all I cared about was the newest release. Oh, this dude, oh, he's from Philly. Oh, this dude is like the way that most kids were about baseball cards and sports, even though I was like really big into basketball. You couldn't tell me anything because I knew everything about everybody that put out a song, where they were from, who made the beat, who the engineer was, where the studio. So sorry, long-winded way of saying that was my thing.
Yeah, no doubt. Is this a point where you start taking hip hop serious and start writing, or was you into maybe DJing first, b-boying? What was your first foray into hip hop around this time?
Yeah, I mean, because I'm that age, right? Because like LA is always after New York. Like, unless you're talking about gangster rap, which is born of LA, really like, I mean, technically, yes, the first gangster record is probably Just Ice, like, and it's probably like those dudes, like for real. And then like Schoolie D, like those dudes were like the first, but like Ice-T, like, you know what I mean, King
Yep.
T, Too Short, like real. That's a West Coast thing. New York was so ahead. So for me, breakdancing came later, right? Then so like I remember seeing breakdancing like most people my age in the movie Flashdance, and you know, here's this movie that's supposed to be set in like Pennsylvania steel mill, blah, blah, blah. And as a kid, I thought it was like New York because it looked like New York, the city. But it's like she's going down the street, and all of a sudden there's Crazy Legs, and they're playing It's Just Begun by Jimmy Castor Bunch. And I would put that moment and MJ moonwalking on the Motown 25 with Change Course of Life moments, because when I was watching this, like, basically love story about this girl who's like a steel worker and this rich dude and she just wants to dance, and as corny but also stylized and amazing and dope as that was, as soon as she saw those b-boys, if you watch it now, it holds up. It's still filmed like long lens, super wide. You see the whole street. It's not corny, man. It's not like watching breaking and like a floating broom and like Save the Youth Center. That was like more hardcore b-boying than anything that anyone had ever seen in mainstream. So from the moment I saw that, I didn't know what it was, and I was like, I need to know what that is. Of course, I wasn't old enough to know that, like, oh, well, that goes back to Cab Calloway and this whole theater, like, you know, this lineage of like black dance and Africa and all of this. I was just like, whatever that thing is, I want to be a part of that with the cardboard or the linoleum. So by the time it was like eight, I want to say when I was 10 years old, because I did everything when I was young. I just young.
Right.
Like, except like drinking and drugs and what most kids do, because I was just too focused. Like I wasn't about that. So like when I was 10, I had linoleum stash behind like the bushes outside this ice cream parlor with older kids, and I could like windmill and egg roll all day. Like I was a badass b-boy. Couldn't do like couldn't do like hands. I could do handspins, but I couldn't like get up on one hand and spin and do that. Couldn't do flips, but like up rocking, all the floor stuff. I hated popping. I hated locking. I thought that was super corny and like rerun What's Happening stuff. But like I was a serious b-boy. I consumed all media. And then this documentary came out called Breaking and Entering, and it's only available on YouTube now. It's not breaking and entering. It's breaking like N apostrophe entering with an apostrophe. And Breaking and Entering was, I think it might have been made by a British or German documentary crew, because no American, it's like just like the way jazz is always appreciated more, like, and black culture is usually embraced by someone other than American mainstream culture at first. Now most mainstream culture is hip hop because that took over, right? 90s on. But back then, nobody was talking about b-boying in Los Angeles, at least. So when I saw this, my mom saw the documentary and she's like, you are going to freak out. I taped this thing for you because we had a VHS early when I was young, because my grandpa was in the porn industry. And so we taped this and I watched it, and the tracking on it went bad because I wore it out. Rewind. And I studied it. And I later became homies with some of the crews that were in that, who were like featured in like the Lionel Richie All Night Long video, who I ended up doing a music video with for a dude named Tyrone Brunson, who was a bass player who had done like his own ripoff of Rocket by Herbie Hancock. And when they went to do the music video, my dad was like, do you want to be extra in a music video? I'm like, no. He's like, there's breakdancing. I was like, yes. So I went, and Ice-T was playing the DJ in it. And it was before he was known to anyone, unless you went to the Radiotron in Los Angeles. And when I met him, I talked about this. But like, this is like, wait, was maybe I must have said it to him. I'm tripping because I'm getting confused because I used to be friends with his DJ. But the thing is, it's like that culture. I was into the breakdancing. And then came turntables, scratching. The first doubles I got was Biz Markie going off the single. The second one I got was How You Like Me Now by Kool Moe Dee. The third one I got, I think, was I Know You Got Soul, but it was I Know You Got Soul by Eric B. and Rakim. I still have them with my like tag on it and everything. And then I started getting into graffiti. And then my mom got me a drum machine. I started making beats. And then finally I started writing rhymes. But like, that's the thing. It's like, this all happened to me in a way of like when my parents' generation like saw the Beatles and Ed Sullivan. I just saw Flashdance and saw breakdancing. Then I was like, Beat Street, breaking, whatever it is. If there's a movie with it in it, I want to see it. I'm like, oh, that's corny, that's lame. And then I'd have my parents take me to that spot where the good breakers are. I want to go. I went to like the premiere in Los Angeles of Beat Street, and that was like amazing. You know what I mean? Like there was breaking in the movie The Last Dragon. Like anything with it, I was like, you would hear from a friend. There was no like Instagram or TikTok. You'd be like, yo, you hear that there's breakers in this? I'm like, I'm there. And honestly, it's really cool because when KRS really explained and broke down the pillars of hip hop, and I actually got to chop it up and build with him about this once, and it was probably one of the most significant experiences in my life in music or in art culture, especially hip hop. But like, I feel very grateful to have had the upbringing that I had, because that has nothing to do with what came later with like Native Tongues and like QD3 and like, but just that foundation, it's so pure, right? It's not about industry. It's not about anything. It's not about like meeting your heroes. It's like, I fell in love with the feeling of that dancing. I fell in love with the look of what that looked like on a wall or a subway. I fell in love with the idea and the physical feeling of scratching a record and matching a beat and then making a beat and then writing a rhyme. And that changed my life forever. I definitely would not have been made music if it wasn't for hip hop, because I was never going to pick up a guitar. And I took guitar lessons. I quit after 2. I was like, I can't do that. Like, it didn't feel like I was a part of it. But because hip hop is so about more than just the playing, right? Or the singing, the playing the drums, whatever it is, I was already a part of the culture by virtue of the fact that was the subculture in 1983 to 1989 that ruled my life. I mean, by 1989, I'm already making records. But what I'm saying is like, it's about what you're around. You know what I mean? Like, you know?
So what year are you starting to take rhymes serious?
So like, honestly, it was like really by accident, bro. Like, you know, for all the talk in recent years about Nepo babies and all this, like if it wasn't for sons and daughters of famous people, I wouldn't have had a lot of doors open for me, because I grew up with a lot of these people after the stuff we're talking about. Because what we're talking about right now, I'm still living in the valley and nobody on my block is interested in any of this. Literally one dude was interested in breakdancing, and he had parachute pants and like tied bandanas around his legs and was like, got out cardboard and we would breakdance together. And he was like 12 years older. So like nobody else liked it. They weren't interested. It was super weird and foreign to them. So I'm living in isolation in the valley, and my dad would have to drive me to the city to experience these things, right? So at one point, and then like years go by, then I'm doing the graffiti and I'm like getting way too into that, and that's starting to get into like real like violence and stuff that I'm like so clearly not a part of, right? And like that's not my thing at all, but it just led there. Because like, let's be real, like you got to keep it a buck that like a lot of the people who were drawn to graffiti were middle class kids who were interested in a lifestyle that was like survival or territorial or creating art out of and beauty out of a shitty situation. So like when you go play in that, you are like, okay, now you're with these dudes who have a lot more at stake and it's different. So what started to happen was I actually had to leave a high school I was at because of sort of that kind of stuff and affiliations. And I was like, you know what I mean? Like I'm at this point 15 years old and I can't even drive. And I'm like, I got to leave this school or else I'm going to get real hurt. And because I was just doing, it wasn't even that I was doing dumb shit. I mean, I was doing, oh, can we curse? I've been trying to keep it very PG.
Absolutely.
Okay. So like it wasn't just that I was doing dumb shit. It was just like I was hanging out with dudes that were like more about it than I was. And so I went to this school, and I'll just say this very quickly. I went to this real random school because a kid had told me, yo, you should go to this school. There's these cool kids there, boom, boom, boom. And it's one of the weirdest things that ever happened in my life. But basically, like, my grandpa remarried, and he married this woman who had a kid. So he was like my default cousin. And this cousin would spin these tales about this incredible school he went to in another suburb of LA called Burbank. And he's like, yo, these kids are into hip hop and graffiti and blah, blah, blah. And he was telling me about his scene and his friends. I'm like, that sounds great. He's like, you should leave your school and come to my school. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, this is before the school I had to bounce from. So then I go to the school and I'm like, okay, my cousin said to go to the school. Well, I end up, my grandpa gets divorced from the woman. He's not my cousin. He quits school and leaves. Now I'm coming to school where this dude told me to go to school because I didn't like my old school anymore. I don't know anybody. Day one of the people he was telling me about, who was a DJ, walked up to me. He's like, you like hip hop? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, check this out. And he hands me a cassette tape. And I swear on my life, it says Dr. Dre Rhodium Swap Meet mixtape. And he's like, you know what this is? I'm like, yes. I just got goosebumps. And so I was like, I could borrow this and tape it. He's like, 100%.
That's not DJ Tony, is it?
No. This dude was his name was Steve Frine, and he was a dude who had 2 Gemini turntables and a Gemini mixer. His mom wouldn't get him the 1200s. I had the 1200s, but I had a Gemini mixer. I didn't have a Newmark mixer, which I always wanted. So like, he became my boy. And then he's like, I want you to meet this other crew. He introduced me to this other crew. They became my crew. And as soon as I met them, I'm like, yo, you know my cousin. I mean, well, he's not really my cousin. The kid's kind of an asshole. But anyways, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah, no, like, we don't fuck with that dude. And I was like, what are you talking about? He told me all about this and this and this. And the kid was a compulsive liar and told me these stories about these kids that he was like stalking at school who we wanted to be a part of. But what's so ill is he convinced me to go to this school and said, come in my clique. And when I got there, they saw me and were like, oh, you're writing graffiti on your notebook and you kind of have some swag. That became my crew, bro. And they didn't even know this dude or fuck with him. And it was like, that is some like God universe sending me to this place. Within 2 months, one of their homies came to school at lunch and was listening to music in the parking lot. And he's like, yo, what's up? Blah, blah, blah. We exchange information. He drives, I don't. We start hanging out. He's a few years older. Within like six months, maybe, dude, honestly, it wasn't 6 months. I was only at that school for 1 semester. Within like 6 days, 6 weeks, this dude's at my crib and he picks up a piece of paper and he's like, what is this? I'm like, it's a rhyme. He goes, who wrote it? I said, me. He goes, yo, will you spit it? I'm like, well, we didn't say spit back then. And I was like, okay. So I did it. And he was like, why are you hanging out with that crew at school? Because these dudes were like all like white, Latin. One was a child actor, and they were like called themselves like some this and that crew, and they were like school talent show rappers. He's like, bro, they're like a total joke. Why don't you do this with me for real? And I said, well, what does for real mean? And he's like, I make music, I play out at clubs, I do shows, I have a producer, I think you're really talented and I want to help you. And so he took me up to, and he's like, you know Kadada's brother? I'm like, no, I only know Kadada's sister. We're talking about Kadada Jones and Rashida Jones. And he's like, well, Kadada has a brother who just moved from Sweden named, they call him Snoopy. QD3 is his producer name. I'm going to bring you up to the crib. So we go up to Quincy Jones's house, and it's like something out of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, except I'm not from South Philly. I'm from North Hollywood. I go up there. I meet QD3. He says, rap for me. I rap for him. And every weekend I started going back, getting rides because I couldn't drive. And he taught me everything about the studio, about making beats, about choruses, verses, breath control, mic, everything. I owe everything to the Quincy QD3 and Quincy Jones and his family. And more than that, to Kevin Hicks, who now goes by the name Danger Boy. And he has a group called Gumbo that's super hot. If Danger Boy didn't see that in me, I have no idea what I'm doing right now, because I'm definitely not sitting here talking to you surrounded by music equipment. He put me on, and he's still my brother, and like that will be forever. But like, he put me on, man. And like, all I know is that I had a crazy work ethic and I wanted it. Before that, I wanted to be a filmmaker and go to film school. But like, now things started changing. Now it's like Kev introduces me to his friend Sophia. Sophia signed the Fushnikins. Her and our other friend, Sean Karasov, rest in peace, who used to be the Beastie Boys road manager, signed Tribe. They're like, yo, Tribe's coming to town. Do you want to help pick them up and take them to the show? They got to play at the show at Compton where where KRS-One's getting the key to the city. Now, like for me, my favorite hip hop group was the Jungle Brothers. And that resonated with me unlike anything I had heard before. So I know who Q-Tip was at that point, and I knew because they had been advertising. They gave him a full song called The Promo on their first record, Straight Out the Jungle, just to put him on. And like, think about it, hip hop's like the only art form where someone will dedicate a song or their to put someone on, like the way that like Danger Boy put me on. So we went to the airport, we picked up Tribe, and that started a lifelong friendship where we drove them to their first show in California, where they were like, "Is there going to be a drive-by?" And we're like, "No, like I've never seen one. I'm from here." We're like, that's what it was like, bro. And it was like, that's crazy. Like, that's crazy. Because by the way, that's 1989. And I'm 16 years old, and we're in the clubs and Fight the Powers out. And the shift that we just talked about that happened between 1987 with even like Bad after Radio, when LL was like, oh, these beats are now they're samples. And now, okay. And then that shift of what happened, 88, then you had It Takes a Nation of Millions. You had By All Means Necessary. And you had Eric B. and Rakim. Like, that was it. To me, like that was it. Like, and then now I'm hanging with Tribe. And then it just goes on, bro. Because Kev moved in with a guy named DJP, Paul Stewart, who ended up managing Coolio and like helping launch so much in like West Coast LA. And Danger Boy, Kev, you live with Paul Stewart and this dude Skate Master Tate, who was like one of the most legendary DJs in LA, who like crossed punk and skate and graffiti and all that. Now I'm hanging at their crib, and two like Puerto Rican, Cuban dudes come by and play us their new record, and that's like Cypress. And I'm like, whoa. And then I'm hanging out with these dudes who we used to dance battle, who were called the Romeos, who then became like a kind of BBD type R&B group. And now they got a group called the Far Side, and they're like definitely crushing everything else in LA. And we would hang out with Eric and Lior, because we were tight with House of Pain, and I was tight with Alchemist before he was, when he was just a badass rapper. Like, LA was crazy, and I was in the center of that. And that says nothing to like when Jerobi brought me to New York and was like, basically walked me into New York City like Henry Hill and Goodfellas, and was just like, he's with us, like he's good, and he co-signed me. And bro, then it was like Lakim Shabazz, Queen Latifah. I met Prince Paul at this Latifah party because he came up to me, and then that led to like De La, and that led to Black Sheep. And that led to me hanging out with Nice and Smooth and Guru and Premier. And dude, like, remember, like, I'm a kid from the Valley. Like,
wow.
And then I'm in the South Bronx sitting like on a bus bench, kicking it with Greg Nice and Smooth B in the Bronx when Fuck Compton came out. And they're like, we got your back in case anybody tries any shit because you're from LA.